Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
Episode 353, Dangerous Man. After sending someone to retrieve Minnie's information, Holden saw the picture on the information. She was very beautiful. From Holden's point of view, many of the things that Zach did were only based on benefits. He did not think highly of them. However, he still felt that it was more likely that Zach would use Minnie to overthrow the Angler family and help Minnie gain power. However, he had just arrived at the Angler family 2 days ago and asked the Angler family to help him. Now that Zach had overturned the Angler family, it was obvious that this was a slap in the face of his family. Would Zach do something so obvious that the two families had a grudge against each other? Holden still didn't think so. Judging from what Zach had done previously, he did think that Zach was that kind of boorish person. But he couldn't understand why Zach would dare to overturn the Angler family. To be honest, there was no need for so many people to overturn the Angler family. It was enough to execute a decapitation mission. But the problem was that the power of the secret stash couldn't give Zach the courage to challenge the Mann family. Unless he was a fool. Therefore, when Holden looked up at the mysterious starry sky, his heart was filled with endless doubts. Mr. Marquez, what was he trying to do? The next morning, Holden received a report from his subordinate. Sir, the Marquez family Zach drove to pick up Minnie and her daughter. He is playing with them in Disneyland. When Holden heard the report, he was stunned for a long time, before he said in surprise, Is there something wrong with this guy? Is he really only getting close to Minnie because he wants to pick up girls? The subordinate in charge of arranging people to follow her was silent for a while, and finally said in a muffled voice, It seems like that's the case. According to your instructions, we have already sent people to monitor Taylor and Mason. There are no unusual movements. Furthermore, Minnie's daughter seems to like Mr. Marquez very much. Mr. Marquez also likes that little girl very much. After getting off the car, let the little girl ride on his shoulders. He has been playing with the child very happily. Holden covered his forehead. Regarding Zach's unusual behavior, he had already been cheated many times. As a successor of the Mann family, he had always researched the families that could pose a threat to the Mann family. The Marquez family was obviously one of them. Furthermore, he had done a lot of research. He had even researched who the successor of the family was. In the Marquez family, he thought that Zach was the one who would most likely take over, so he had always sent people to pay attention to Zach. This also led to him often finding out that Zach would do things that seemed to be brainless, but had a deeper meaning. However, after some time, he realized that Zach's goal was very simple. He either wanted to pick up girls or win an award by shooting a movie. There was nothing else. Even when it came to the hydrogen power system, Zach had built a car, but there was no movement. He was just focusing on building the car and did nothing else. Could it be that this is really a playboy who doesn't care about his family at all? Regarding Zach, Holden felt a headache coming on. He realized that he seemed to have overestimated his opponent. However, he still did not relax. After that, he ordered his subordinates to keep a close eye on Taylor and Mason. If Zach really became crazy and wanted to slap the face of the family, he would also be prepared. At this time, Zach, who was unable to figure out Holden and even had a headache, went to play with Minnie and her daughter in Disneyland. Zach deliberately did not make a move early, because he wanted to attract Holden's attention. Didn't this fellow cause trouble for me twice? All right, this time, I'll give you a warning before fighting. I'll make everything clear to you. I'll let you prepare to fight me again. Thinking about it, there was nothing much to do in the past 2 days. Zach had contacted Minnie early in the morning. When he suggested accompanying them to Disneyland, Minnie could not believe it. Although she felt that his idea was quite absurd, she still thought that Zach might want to pursue her. Otherwise, she really could not explain why Zach did this. and even accompanied Juniper and her to play. However, Juniper did not think too much about it. When she found out that Zach wanted to accompany her and her mother to Disneyland, she immediately danced with joy. On the road, Zach and Juniper, who were sitting in the back row, had a very happy time together. Juniper's happy smile often came over. Seeing her daughter so happy, Minnie's mood also couldn't help but get better. After they arrived at Disneyland, they played games such as Misty Mansion, Anti-Do Cavalry Base Camp, and Toy Corps Parachute Jumping. Zach played all the games that could be played by children with Juniper. After that, they played other games, and the three of them had a lot of fun. After they finished playing games with the 7 dwarfs, they got out of the mine and met a face they didn't want to see. Mark Angler. It seemed that Juniper was quite afraid of Mark Angler, as if she had been scared by him before. Her perfect little face was full of smiles, and at this moment, it was full of nervousness. She hid behind Minnie and tugged on Zach's clothes. "Let's go. He's a bad man." Zach smiled and used his finger to shave her face. "Don't worry, I am the biggest bad person." Episode 354. I Know You. "Mr. Marquez, it's such a coincidence to meet you here." Mark Angler came forward with a smile, his face full of pride. He was no longer the same Mark Angler as before. He was a man who had Holden as his backing. He even had the hope of becoming the patriarch. Before this, he naturally did not need to be as respectful as before, and he did not even need to be respectful. Zach looked at him with a smile. "It's quite a coincidence. Why? Do you still have the childishness of a child? Do you like to come to Disneyland to play?" Mark Angler had clearly come to find Zach, but Zach had given him a childish evaluation. This made Mark Angler a little unhappy. However, no matter how unhappy he was, he had to accept it. In front of Zach, he was still a head shorter. "Mr. Marquez is joking. I am only here to find Minnie and Juniper. I didn't expect Mr. Marquez to be here as well." Zach suddenly understood, but before he could say anything, Mark Angler looked at Minnie with a cold expression. "Minnie, I hope you can give me a reasonable explanation for the corpse in the flower shop." Minnie was not Juniper. She only hated Mark Angler and did not fear him. Now that she had Zach as her backing, she naturally wouldn't worry about Mark Angler taking revenge on her and Juniper. Therefore, she quickly explained. "She crashed into a rose and died. This is the explanation." Mark Angler felt that he had been played like a pig. Would anyone die if they bumped into the rose? Just as he was about to refute, Zach said, "I can prove that you can die from bumping into a rose." Mark Angler was very angry. Zach and Minnie talking nonsense with their eyes wide open made him extremely unhappy in his heart. However, because of Zach's identity, he still said, "All right, since Mr. Marquez is here to testify for you, there will naturally not be a problem. But there is another matter. Why did you leave a restricted area given to you by your family?" Mark Angler interrogated Minnie again, and his expression was very fierce. It made Juniper's small hand grab Minnie's clothes even tighter. This time, without waiting for Minnie to explain, Zach answered on her behalf. "I brought them here. Do you want to interfere with the rules of your family?" Mark Angler was rendered speechless by the retort, but because of this, he became even more furious. He had tried his best to avoid any more conflicts with Zach, but Zach had gone too far. Therefore, after thinking about Holden that he was relying on, Mark Angler finally started to act tough. "Mr. Marquez, I hope you can understand that this is a matter of the Angler family. Don't get involved in our internal affairs." Tisk, tisk, Zach had tissed twice, then put Minnie in front of him and kissed her on the lips. After that, he said to Mark Angler, "This is my friend. Does it still count as an internal affair of the Angler family?" At this moment, Mark Angler was getting angrier and angrier. He had never thought that Zach would say such a thing. Would the Angler family dare to interfere with the direct disciples of the Marquez family? Obviously, they wouldn't dare to do so. There was no doubt about it. Not to mention Holden, even the grandfather of the current family head, wouldn't dare to interfere. However, Mark Angler was still unhappy and very angry. Mark Angler did not say anything else. However, Zach made his move. A loud slap landed on Mark Angler's face. Mark Angler was struck dumb. He had no idea why Zach wanted to hit him. The next moment, Zach made him understand the pain. "I told you Minnie was my friend. Then why don't you get lost? Who sent you? The courage of a dog. Is it Holden?" Under the watchful eyes of everyone, there was still subordinates watching from afar. Mark Angler was quite embarrassed, and his heart was burning with anger. When he heard Zach mention Holden, he didn't hesitate to tear off all pretenses of cordiality and show off his backer, Holden. "Mr. Marquez, you don't have the right to interfere in the matters of the Angler family. If you insist on bringing out the Marquez family to suppress me, then I can only ask Mr. Holden to reason with you." Finally, he brought out Holden. Zach estimated that this was the true meaning of Mark Angler's arrival today. Mark Angler wanted to tell him that the Angler family was protected by Holden and that he shouldn't be too arrogant. However, it was really embarrassing. No one could suppress Zach's madness. Therefore, in the next moment, Mark Angler received another slap on his face. "You even brought out your Holden to suppress me? Mark Angler, you're really interesting. Come, call him now. Call him over and stand right here. See if he will stop me if I hit you in front of him." Zach asked Mark Angler to call. Mark Angler did not dare, because he knew that he could not call Holden. Holden would not come specifically for him, and it would even be impossible to stop Zach from hitting him. Because of him, Mark Angler, the Mann family, was going to clash with the Marquez family. Was this possible? He didn't dare to think about this matter anymore. The reason why he had asked Holden to reason with Zach was because he wanted to show that he already had a powerful backer. Who would have thought that Zach would ignore him and attack him even more ruthlessly? At this time, Zach even said to Juniper, "Juniper, are you afraid of him?" Juniper secretly glanced at Mark Angler. She was so scared that she hid in Zach's arms and kept nodding her head. It seemed like this Mark Angler had visited many times to make fun of them. This was the reason why Juniper was afraid of Mark Angler. Zach said to Juniper, who was in his arms, "Juniper, listen to me. You have to face whatever you are afraid of. The more scared you are, the more you will have to face it. Only when you are used to it will you not be afraid." Juniper was indeed sensible. If it were any other child, they would not have even listened to this logic. However, he did not expect that not only did Juniper listen to him, she also mustered up her courage and started to do whatever he said. She then turned her eyes to Mark Angler. At this moment, Mark Angler saw that the usually timid Juniper actually dared to raise her head and look at him. This made him feel a strong sense of provocation. Thus, his expression became even fiercer, as if he was going to eat someone. Zach had also seen this point. Therefore, he said to Juniper, whose eyes were filled with fear, "Don't be afraid. You hit him just like your uncle just now. He doesn't dare to fight back. He is just a loser." Juniper didn't dare, but under Zach's repeated encouragement, she still made a counterattack that belonged to her in the end. A mouthful of saliva was spat on Mark Angler's cheek. Episode 355. Gifts are big. Mark Angler was extremely furious. Juniper actually dared to spit on him. This was far more humiliating than slapping him one by one. He waved his palm as if he was going to hit Zach. Juniper was so scared that she quickly hugged Zach's neck. However, before his palm could land, Zach raised his leg and sent him flying with a kick. Mark was on the ground. "How dare you attack me in front of Juniper? Who do you think you are, Mark Angler?" Mark Angler was very angry. He held his stomach and was about to get up. However, in the next moment, Zach pointed his finger angrily at him. "Kneel down on the ground! If you dare to get up, I will kill you here, you piece of trash! If you don't believe me, you can try!" Zach's anger erupted from his body. Mark Angler's subordinates in the distance didn't dare to approach him either. Even their boss, himself, did not dare to make a sound. How could they dare to move forward? They were courting death. Zach handed the jade in his arms to Minnie, who was beside him. Then he walked towards Mark Angler, who was lying on the ground. At this moment, Mark Angler was extremely embarrassed and angry. There was nothing he could do about it. He wanted to get up. He didn't want to lose face in front of his subordinates. He didn't want to lose face in front of Minnie and Juniper. But he didn't dare, because he knew that Zach wasn't joking. However, he didn't want to kneel down because that would make him lose even more face. So he could only fall to the ground. He didn't want to kneel, nor did he want to. He was caught in a dilemma. However, Zach didn't make things difficult for him. Instead, he squatted down beside him and reached out his hand to lock his throat. "Not kneeling? Do you want to die? I'll fulfill your wish." In front of those subordinates of the Angler family, Zach started beating Mark Angler. However, no one dared to step forward. They didn't dare. Not only them, but also Mark Angler, because he was currently under the threat of losing his life. Zach's palm was getting tighter and tighter. Mark Angler could feel that his life force was getting further and further away from him. Therefore, he didn't know what was going on. His two legs seemed to be out of control. He curled up and kneeled on the ground. At this moment, his posture was really like a dog. Zach sneered. He let go of Mark Angler's palm and patted his face. "So, you will kneel. I thought you were tough. I originally thought that Holden had given you 2 alloy legs, and you wouldn't be able to kneel down. I didn't expect you to kneel so quickly." Mark Angler panted heavily, enjoying the freedom of breath. At this time, he no longer cared about being embarrassed. He just wanted to live. Zach could not be bothered with this trash anymore. He continued to play in Disneyland and was not affected at all. Zach walked away with Minnie and her daughter. Only then did Mark Angler dare to stand up. When his subordinates rushed over, Mark Angler waved his hand and slapped them hard. "Trash! Trash! All of them are trash!" His subordinates were all quite annoyed. They thought they were not trash. You came to find trouble, and in the end, you got beaten up and knelt down, and even almost died. Mark Angler himself had also realized this, so he was especially embarrassed and angry. For a time, he wanted to find someone to kill Zach. But in the end, this could not only exist on impulse. It wouldn't evolve into reality. He didn't have the courage to do so, let alone him. Even his master, Holden, didn't dare to do such a thing. That was no longer killing, but digging his own grave to seek death. Therefore, Mark Angler pondered and still had to think of a way to get closer to Holden. As long as he became the loyal and indispensable lackey of Holden, and his status would truly rise. After playing in Disneyland for the whole day, it was already nighttime, and he returned to Minnie's manor. The three of them had dinner outside, and when they returned home, Juniper still stuck to Zach. Episode 356, Brave Brothers. The next morning, when Juniper woke up, she went around looking for Zach, but she couldn't find him no matter how hard she tried. Thus, Juniper ran upstairs and opened the door. At this time, Minnie was sleeping loudly on the bed. However, Juniper could not care about that anymore. With a shake, she successfully woke up Minnie, who had just fallen asleep not long ago. Mom, where did Uncle go? I need to find Uncle. People who woke up when they had just fallen asleep usually did not have a good temper. However, as a mother, Minnie naturally would not treat her daughter like this. She rubbed her forehead, which was in pain, and said, Uncle went to do something. He will come and play with Juniper another day, okay? Juniper was very unhappy. Her little mouth suddenly pouted and her eyebrows bent. She didn't cry, but tears flowed down under her eyes. At this time, she cried and said, I want Uncle! I want Uncle! Minnie felt helpless. She actually felt that it wasn't a good thing for Zach and Juniper to have such a good relationship. Zach could not even leave. Once he left, Juniper would cry so sadly. This made her heart ache. After much discussion, Minnie finally managed to coax Juniper. At this time, Zach had already arrived at the international airport. The ticket he bought was for returning to the country, and the boarding gate was also for returning to the country. All signs indicated that he was returning to the country. Donnie accompanied him. Taylor used his connections to enter the inner court to accompany him and sent Zach away. When the boarding gate opened, Zach greeted Taylor and told him to take care of Minnie and her daughter's safety. Then he went to the boarding gate with Donnie. Because large planes were difficult to get close to, they needed to take a ferry when they passed the boarding gate. Seeing Zach and Donnie disappear into the airport, Taylor shook his head helplessly. He didn't even know how he would protect Minnie and her daughter after Zach left. Could it be that he was going to fight the Angler family on behalf of the Zach family? Thinking about it, this was the only thing that he could do. It was just that he could resist for a while, but it was not easy to resist forever. Taylor was very worried and sighed as he left the airport. At this time, two people in the airport divided into east and west sides and watched Taylor from afar. Taylor sighed as he left, and then he called to report to their respective masters. Their information was the same. Taylor personally went into the inner court to deliver the plane. Zach bought a plane ticket back to the country. They saw Zach enter the boarding gate with their own eyes. Mark Angler, who received the call, heaved a long sigh of relief. Zach, that Scrooge, had finally left. Although he was very unhappy and wished he could kill Zach, he still did not have the ability to do so. He could only hope that Zach would leave as soon as possible. The other person who received the call was the person who had already left, Canada's Holden. Zach has returned to the country. Did you see him board the plane with your own eyes? After getting the exact information from his subordinate, Holden rubbed his forehead again. He thought too much again. It seemed like Zach only wanted to play with Minnie. Other than that, he had no other intentions. He knew that Zach had beaten up Mark Angler. He also knew that Zach had spent the night at Minnie's house. Perhaps Zach would seek an explanation for Minnie's father's death in the future. But that was something that would happen in the future, so he could leave it at that moment. Furthermore, after thinking about it carefully, Zach had finally regained his face. He had even beaten up the little lackey of this Holden, and he had even said that he wouldn't stop him, even if he went in front of the little dog's legs. He had earned back quite a bit of face, so he should be satisfied. Although, if he had been present that day, he really wouldn't have stopped him. What a joke. He wanted to help Mark Angler stop him, putting aside whether it was worth it to have a conflict with the Zach family on the surface. He wasn't interested in Mark Angler, this little dog. Mark Angler was not qualified to stop Mark Angler from getting beaten up. All right, I will stop the impact of the wind chaser on the market. In the future, I don't have to worry about profits in this area. Sitting in a custom-made luxury car, Holden crossed his legs and leisurely smoked a cigar. He believed that when he returned home this time, his grandfather would definitely praise him greatly. Everyone thought that Zach had returned home with a dejected face, including Taylor. But in fact, after they passed the boarding gate, Zach and Donnie boarded another ferry and used another identity. How could he not give a bigger gift to Holden? He had to give it a good surprise. When the plane landed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Zach and Donnie boarded a military Hummer that had been waiting for them for a long time. His car was uncomfortable, but Zach did not come for comfort. After getting into the car, the driver in charge of driving was the person who was in charge of dealing with Donnie last year in the Middle East, Gummy, who was Angelina's #1 subordinate. Mr. Zach, you are here. Gummy was very surprised when she saw Zach because she knew Angelina would be very happy because Angelina often told her to go and find out about Zach. Miss Angelina will definitely be very surprised when she sees you. Definitely. Episode 357, Angelina. When Zach saw Angelina, she was talking business with a big client. It seemed that the business was going smoothly. The two of them had already signed the contract and shook hands with each other with smiles on their faces. After getting up and sending the big client away, Angelina sat back in her chair and closed the documents. Just as she was about to hand it over to the follower beside her, she looked up and saw a familiar figure that she had been thinking about day and night. Angelina suddenly stood up, and her charming face was filled with joy. My king, are you here? This is really a big surprise. Angelina looked at Zach with deep affection. My king, I thought you would never talk to me again. The Ursa family joined in on the fun when Holden started a siege against the hydrogen power system, and this order was issued by Angelina herself. She wanted to fight side by side with Zach, but she couldn't allow her family to lose in the competition for the hydrogen energy system. She also couldn't allow her family to stand opposite of all the other families, including the Mann family. Therefore, no matter how much she liked Zach, she could only suppress her feelings and put the family as a top priority. However, because of this, she felt guilty about Zach. After all, Zach had saved her life. The horizontal scar on Zach's back would always remind Angelina of this. Zach smiled and said to Angelina, I came to find you because I have something to ask you for help. Angelina hummed. Her voice was filled with tenderness. I can guess that you must have something to do with me. Otherwise, my king would not come to me. Tell me, what do you want me to do? When she said this, Angelina's heart was already thinking about it. If it was something that was harmful to the family's important interests, she absolutely could not do it. Even though she really liked Zach, she still had to consider the entire Ursa family. Therefore, she had already set a bottom line in her heart. She was determined not to do anything that would seriously harm the interests of the family. However, what Zach said after that made her feel surprised. Zach said, other than Mason, I have recruited some new people. I want to train them. But you also know that Donnie's side has already been taken over by Mason. I can only use you to pull the equipment and train them. I think you can arrange a team of 100 people for them. Your people will train them and make them grow faster. Angelina asked in surprise, you want me to help you with this kind of thing? Zach was stunned and asked back, what? Then what should it be? Angelina thought it was related to snatching the hydrogen power system. She did not expect it to be such a small matter. You are worried that your grandfather will find out about this. He will confiscate your grandfather's body. That way, you will lose all your trump cards in the fight with Michael and Kyle, right? Zach raised his thumb. I expected of the incarnation of beauty and wisdom, Angelina. Sure enough, nothing can be hidden from you. How about it? Help your king become the true king of Zach family. Finishing her words, Angelina called Gummy. Gummy, arrange 100 of your strongest warriors to be fully armed, and you will lead them personally. Very quickly, Angelina arranged this matter. Gummy did not dare to dawdle and only appeared at the door of the room after 10 minutes. Miss Angela, Mr. Marquez, the 100 strongest warriors are ready. Angelina nodded and then looked at Zack. Her meaning was very clear. Just let them listen to Zack's instructions. Zack did not stand on ceremony and directly instructed Donnie, who had followed Gummy here. Go, Donnie! Take these brothers with you! Go! Episode 358. Save Me. Donnie already knew what he should do in his heart. It was as if he had seen through everything, so he agreed readily. Under the lead of Donnie and Gummy, 100 fully armed soldiers left through a specific method. The next night at 8 p.m., Minnie wore a black suit and a black shirt with a solemn expression. She entered the basement of the manor. There was no light, but there was a long bright oil lamp in the basement. It was very simple. Just like the wooden figurines on the table, there were some that belonged to her father and her mother. There were also some that belonged to her older brother, second brother, and her husband. Minnie took out a dagger from her wrist and knelt in front of the table. She closed her eyes and thought of her father, who was a man of new reputations. That year, she would have been 6 or 7 years old. Her father was publicly appointed by her grandfather to be the new leader of the Angler family. Everyone applauded. She looked very happy, and she was also very happy at that time. But at that time, she was not sensible and thought that she would be happy about what everyone was happy about. But at that time, she did not know that many people only had happy expressions on their faces. In fact, they were not happy in their hearts. At that time, her impression of her father was very strong. In her eyes, he was a tall tree. Everyone praised her father for being a genius. She couldn't remember what her father had done at that time, but she vaguely remembered that he had helped the Angler family get rid of a disaster. When she was 15 years old, she was brought back from boarding school. Something big had happened at home. When she got home, she found out that her father had already been selected as the new head of the family. From that day on, she had become the princess of the Angler family, and everyone was supporting her. On the night her father became the new leader, she saw everyone laughing. However, she began to feel that although some people were laughing, their eyes weren't friendly. The representative of this group was Mark Angler. When she was 17 years old, she was once again brought home from boarding school. She thought that something happy had happened again. As a result, just as she returned to her home, she was imprisoned together with her brother and her second brother. At that time, her mother was also imprisoned. The family of 4 stayed at home in fear. They had no idea what had happened. When Mark Angler came over, he held the bloody blade in his right hand and a human head in his left. That human head was her father. He was reputed as the new leader of the Angler family. Her mother had pounced on him as if she had gone mad. In the end, what welcomed her was the nearly meter-long blade in Mark Angler's hand. Her mother had died a painful death, and she had struggled for nearly 2 minutes. Her eldest brother struggled and pounced on her. He hugged his mother tightly in his arms and cried out with tears streaming down his face. However, his big brother didn't even have the chance to fight with his life on the line. Just as he held his mother in his arms, with a poof sound, his head fell to the ground. It was unknown if it was a coincidence, but her big brother's head and her father's head fell side by side. Both of them were staring at the second brother with their eyes wide open. The second brother was scared silly at that time. The legs of the second brother, who was reputed to be a man of little fame, kept shaking, and even his pants were wet. Mark Angler, who was carrying the blade, wanted to make a move, but in the end, his subordinate caught up with him with the phone. If it wasn't for the phone call at that critical moment, the second brother would have died at Mark Angler's hands. She and the second brother were imprisoned in the house. After that, the second brother kept crying and didn't say anything. At that time, she was also scared silly. She sat next to the second brother and asked him what to do. However, the second brother still didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. He just cried, and his face turned pale with fright. Finally, the second brother opened his mouth. However, he didn't say it to her. Instead, he muttered to himself, "I want to live. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I want to live." He tossed and turned. There were only these two sentences, but these two sentences made my second brother go crazy. In the end, he even threw himself at the door. "Uncle, I want to draw a clear line with them. I didn't do anything. They deserve to die, but I didn't do anything. Please don't kill me." They deserve to die. This sentence completely angered Minnie. The second brother had inherited his father's wisdom, but he did not inherit his father's courage. At this moment, his courage was inherited by the angry Minnie. She smashed the window glass, then ignored the pain and grabbed the glass in her hand. She rushed forward and cut the second brother's throat. This scene was coincidentally seen by Mark Angler, who had just entered the room. Minnie foolishly threw the glass on the ground and collapsed on the ground, shivering with tears in her eyes. "Uncle, he wants to kill me. He said he wants me to die and obtain your trust. He wants to live and avenge his parents. But I don't want to die. Uncle, I don't want to die. I don't want anything. I don't want your trust either. I just want to live." That night, Minnie was begging for forgiveness on the ground. Her forehead was broken, and her heart was filled with worry. She was worried that she would be beheaded by Mark Angler, just like her father and big brother. But in the end, it was not because Mark Angler was kind, but because there was a person who sided with him, who suggested keeping her around. After all, destroying a family was too conspicuous. Keeping Minnie, who was useless, was both good-looking and not a threat. There were also many people who voiced their agreement, which was why she was left alive. Later on, she found out that those people were all forced to side with Mark Angler, and they joined after her father died. All these years, the reason why she was able to live without suffering any severe injuries was because those people were protecting her. As her thoughts flew about, the clan elders who saved her all those years ago came over with their subordinates. Following that, Donnie had also come. He had even brought along 100 fully armed men who only listened to her orders. The sharp dagger cut open the wound on her left hand that was cut open by the glass when she killed her second brother. Minnie dyed the few figurines red with blood. If tonight I cannot use the heads of Mark Angler's family of 13 to pay tribute to you, I, Minnie, will commit suicide in front of the mausoleum.